You could say so much about the man behind one of the greatest sitcoms to ever exist. You could talk about how much of a great comedian he is.
And I found out something about myself while the dentist was doing that. I found out if I was ever paralyzed from the knee down, I'd be able to walk with my behind.
You could talk about how much of a great writer, businessman, and/or icon he is.
I brought you in this world, and I'll take you out.
You could also, and rightfully so, talk about how much of a monster he is, and depending on the way that you choose to perceive the situation, how much of a victim he is. Say what you will about the man known as Bill Cosby, but there is one thing that cannot be denied nor refuted, and that is how much of a genius he was in creating The Cosby Show. Now, I understand that The Cosby Show, for reasons outside of its control, is kind of a touchy subject for most. The man who single-handedly reinvigorated the TV sitcom genre, becoming the archetype for TV dads for years to come, something to strive for as the ultimate dad, and something to look up to as the ideal father figure, turned out to be a serial rapist. And as a consequence of the internal moral conflict that everyone has as a way of not appearing as though they are supporting the very show that helped to elevate Cosby to an almost saint-like status, an image that on retrospect we now view as being more of a shield to protect him from any sexual allegations to come his way, people would rather give the show the Farrah Franklin Destiny's Child treatment and act like it just never existed. That internal moral conflict is what makes it extremely difficult for one to differentiate the man from the character, the man from the family, and the man from the series. So, like Cosby himself, they attempt to throw the show into a sea of obscurity, never to be brought up ever again, like he who shall never be named.
Voldemort.
Voldemort.
Voldemort. Voldemort.
Voldemort.
Voldemort. Voldemort.
Voldemort.
Lord Voldemort.
Voldemort.
Okay.
Voldemort.
Seriously.
Voldemort.
You really shouldn't be saying
Voldemort.
hey,
Voldemort.
please.
Voldemort.
Iago, Joker, Voldemort.
And Lord Voldemort.
But I think that a show like The Cosby Show, with the kind of impact that it had, frankly deserves better. So what I'm asking for you to now do is to not suspend your moral judgments or teachings and to not excuse his behavior, but to instead not allow for the legacy of an entire series to disappear in vain because of one man's actions. And if you think that that sounds impossible, well, that's why I'm here. So allow for me to assist you in that process. Recognizing the duality of The Cosby Show means that you recognize how, at its best, it's a show that revolutionized the sitcom as we know it, helped to redefine blackness to white America, whilst simply showcasing another aspect of it to black America, and, at its worst, be viewed as an image of black respectability politics that now serves as a reminder of a tarnished legacy and let down nostalgia. Nevertheless, before we get into all of that, let's start from the beginning, shall we?
Yes, Bill? Would you like to join my gentleman's club?
Bill Cosby, you got a lot of nerve getting on the phone with me after what you did to my Aunt Paulette.
The Cosby Condo.
Marcy Carsey and Tom Werner, a writer-producer duo who were executives at ABC that oversaw shows like Mork and Mindy, Three's Company, and Welcome Back, Kotter, by 1981 had decided to start their own independent production company, the Carsey-Werner Company, which eventually went on to pen shows like Roseanne, A Different World, That 70s Show, and Third Rock from the Sun. It was in the next couple of years from their company's inception that they became tapped to develop a sitcom for Cosby after watching his stand-up routine for The Tonight Show, and also as a way of giving their new company some clout. When the show was first pitched to NBC, a network who at the time was desperate for a hit, it revolved around the life of a limousine driver father, stay-at-home mother, and their kids. This received a 6-episode order, but before the pilot was taped, Cosby had a change of heart. Instead of a blue-collar household, Cosby wanted to present a singular, not universal version of an upwardly mobile black family, complete with a father who was no longer a limo driver but a successful doctor, and a mother no longer simply confined to the spaces, inner workings, and problems of the household, but to the spaces, inner workings, and problems of the law as well, along with the additions origins of an eldest daughter named Sandra, who was a college student, which mirrored Cosby's desire to show that the family had successfully shepherded a child into higher education, as well as the guidance from Dr. Alvin Poussaint, a psychiatrist whose work focused on the nuances of raising Black children. All of these things, along with themes of education, family, and Black love, helped to make the show, which premiered in 1984, a hit right out of the gate, propelling it to the #1 spot on the Nielsen TV ratings for the first 5 of its 8 seasons, get the character of Cliff Huxtable to be hailed by TV Guide as the greatest TV dad, give Black livelihood a new image.
Your mother and I are rich. You have nothing.
Lead to a resurgence of Black college enrollment, let other stand-up comedians know that a sitcom that was developed around their own personality and viewpoints could be successful, and also helped to usher in a new renaissance of Black TV. And although those facts exist, not everyone is or was as sold on the Cosby Show's positive influence and legacy on the world. There were and still are those that view the show as being nothing more than a hollow, unrealistic, respectability politics-driven, sad excuse for a Black TV show.
Chili down or cool back or whatever these people say.
Maintaining that the lack of serious life-altering subjects, especially topics centering around race, was the show's biggest downfall.
I wanted to see different images. I wanted to see education. I wanted to see people talking to their children the way most American parents, and for that matter, international parents, talk.
They argued how the show relied on this fallacy of the American dream, one that includes a Black family that made it, as proof that there is no rule, rather than them being the exception to it.
2 girls at school were picking on me.
What did they do to you?
They called me a rich girl.
And
Because of this, it then created and projected an image to society that served as a reminder, more specifically to Black people, that if they can make it, so can you. And if you're not making it, then there's something wrong with you. Of course, that's ignoring all of the overtly and inadvertently systemic and personal obstacles that one must overcome. The Huxtables were the ideal Black family that seemed to live in this ideal world where by not tackling something like race, it would allow for more people to look past it.
None of this would have happened if we weren't so rich.
In other words, by ignoring the very real day-to-day problems that face the Black community and other communities of color due to the pigmentation of one's skin in history, the white community didn't have to feel guilty or even be conscious of a system that benefits them and that they more often than not help to consciously and or unconsciously reinforce daily, thus leading them to tune in, keeping the show on the top of the ratings list every week.
Huh. I was so busy not seeing color, I didn't see the raping either.
Now to all of that I say, I hear and understand those complaints. Maybe besides breaking stereotypes, the show also created an impossible standard that's hard to live up to, thus making the typical Black family of the time feel even more like outsiders, with the very subtle, almost hidden chastisement of one's socioeconomic standing and characters that chose to not wear their Blackness on their sleeve.
Well, the sleeves didn't want to come down this morning.
See, Dad, I cut them off.
And to that, I say, so what? Maybe instead of focusing on that, you can instead look at the show for what it was and what it sought to do in all of its fictional, realistic glory. The Cosby Show's polysemic appeal is what got people to tune in, helping to make the show as important and legendary as it is. It presented a cross-section of characters of all ages and provided places of identification for the audience segments most significant for networks and advertising. Basically, the show was relatable as fuck. It allowed white liberals to enjoy Black characters and Black people to witness a more positive image of Black life and love on the screen. From the get-go, the show was never meant to be this social commentary on Black culture and experience, but instead about an upper middle class family that just so happened to be Black. Using material and perspectives that was taken from Cosby's stand-up, the show chose to focus on characters and the day-to-day struggles within the familial unit, like the death of a goldfish.
We got dressed up for this.
Or the anticipated and also dreaded first day of school.
This could scar her for the rest of her life.
Denise, just point me in the direction of that school and I am out of here.
Or a father that just wants to enjoy a relaxing Saturday morning, but can't because he falls victim to the interferences from kids that he helped to create.
I said, man.
And or a daughter that got caught underage drinking. And even though the show was never meant to be a social commentary on the Black experience, the show was able to tackle all of those things whilst still finding a way to celebrate Black culture. Whether it was through the HBCU repping, foods, music, and the showcasing of various movements, artists, and other important figures, the Cosbys were still, after all, a black family that never tried to hide their blackness. But they were also a family where other families, not just black, but white, Latino, Asian, Indian, etc., could look at them and say, hey, we are the Huxtables, or hey, we could be the Huxtables, or even, hey, we want to be the Huxtables. For black families specifically, even though the show's social mishandlings were very real and may not have been a reality for the average black family, it still was a reality for some kind of black family somewhere, and I don't think that that should be overlooked.
Your father and I are not rich.
We're not?
No, honey, we're not. Rich is when your money works for you, not when you work for the money, and we work hard for the money.
I myself am black and grew up, we'll say, middle class. I can't ever recall a time growing up where I had any kind of a racial talk with my parents or experienced any forms of life-changing overt racism. Of course, I'm not saying that I haven't experienced racism. I am a young black woman living in America with a sociology degree at that, okay? I know what the true tea is.
Hold on.
However, race and racism was something that I came to learn about more so through education, in school, and on my own time. Now, seeing as though this was the case, does this then negate my or my family's blackness? Hell no. We save grease and plastic bags. We've had butter containers that have doubled as barrette containers. I know that my mother is not one of my little friends, and I'm pretty sure that I have some form of undiagnosed scoliosis from having to bend over and get my hair washed in the sink. So yeah, just because my family didn't have those conversations with me growing up doesn't negate my blackness, and it shouldn't negate the Huxtables either.
Vanessa, please, your father and I have been through much too much this evening to be sitting up here thinking about a punishment for you right now.
But I'd like my punishment before I go to bed.
The show was meant to break down stereotypes, providing an image of normalized blackness that America had never seen before on screen, and paved the way for other voices to pick up where the story left off, or where it fell rather silent. I think that the arguments that surround The Cosby Show all essentially revert back to the base argument of, is visual representation enough, or does that representation need to push boundaries through dialogue, commentary, and inner systems? Yes, things always need to progress, and one should never be solely satisfied with just visual representation. But without that visual representation getting the train moving, who's to say that actually pushing through those boundaries would have gotten the chance that they so rightfully deserve? It's kind of like that X did this so that Y could then go on and do this kind of thing. I think that where that whole argument falls short is in recognizing the value that said visual representation brings. In The Cosby Show's case, it showed a normal, loving, and bonded black family. That had educated children who weren't prone to making mistakes.
Go to bed!
A strong and liberated matriarch who was still very much in love with her goofy but well-meaning husband and patriarch of the family. I don't think you all understand just how revolutionary that all was for the TV landscape at the time.
5 children, 21 years. What are you celebrating?
Survival.
Yes, this may have been a normal narrative for a good number of black families growing up during this time. However, the art was nowhere near imitating life at that point. We often take the Huxtables for granted because we have since had more representation both on the little and big screens. And that's great, but it's important to remember the context that surrounded the show and how that wasn't always the case. Before The Cosby Show, we had Good Times and Sanford and Son. Shows that represented a starker reality of black families where they lived in poverty, were uneducated, content with not really improving their lives, and the American dream to them was unattainable.
You hear that, Elizabeth? I'm coming to join you, honey. Rich.
Then we had The Jeffersons, a show where for the first time we really saw black people who were coexisting with white people. And not to take anything away from these shows because they are important in their own right, but it should also be noted that these shows, and for a myriad of reasons, never actually reached the same kind of cultural impact as The Cosby Show. One of those reasons being a lack of universality that exceeded color lines when it came to their main themes. I also think that it's important to bring up the fact that Cosby is first and foremost an artist and entertainer. The Cosby Show is his art and it entertains. Sometimes art and entertainment don't need to cross off every single checkpoint within the human condition for it still to be considered important and valuable. I mean, just saying, I don't see think pieces springing up about Leave It to Beaver not tackling the civil rights movement or Barney not discussing the child poverty epidemic. You could say I'm reaching, but you get the point. Though now, unfortunately, some plot points, jokes, and character professions take on a completely different connotation, feel, and vibe to them. And with the numerous revelations that have come out since then regarding other sex scandals, reminding us that behavior of this kind is constantly looked over, normalized, and even made profitable if you hold the right power and lawyer's number. I mean, seriously, how was Weinstein's lawyer able to make that contract actually happen? It will never, and I feel as though should never, diminish the cultural footprint and legacy that The Cosby Show left for us. So now we're in the year 2020. Almost 4 years removed from the brunt of the force, from the whirlwind that was allegation after allegation, revelation after revelation from various women coming forward with their own stories about Cosby. More than 2 years removed from the trial, and less than 2 years removed from his subsequent sentencing. This new reality of a post-Cosby era that essentially told us that nothing is sacred, not even the nostalgia of our youth that's filled with nothing but fond memories of this show and man, was a tough pill for people to swallow, me included. I mean, we all grew up with him in some capacity, whether it was live, through reruns, and or animation, or a combination of these things. Cosby played a pretty significant part in a majority of our lives. Speaking personally though, Bill Cosby for me is someone that hasn't held the most favorable public image for a majority of my existence. Besides being the creator of one of the best animated kids shows ever, Little Bill,
hello, friend.
Cosby has often been seen and described as an angry, bitter, hypocritical rapist, and then serial rapist.
He told me, I think the worst part of the Cosby thing was the hypocrisy. And I disagreed.
You disagree with that?
Yeah. I thought it was the raping.
Now, though this is the case, I think that if a girl like me with that kind of image of a man who is known for his clean comedy and as America's dad could still see and understand the importance of and also enjoy a show that was in its own right very funny, then who's to say that others can't either? And that's another thing about this show that I think gets sadly overlooked, are the great comedic performances from everyone involved, not just Cosby.
Why? When I put my hand on the mother, I could feel things moving all around.
That's not a baby.
What is it?
Gas.
Every piece of art, no matter how frivolous or masterful, has its own purpose. Whether it actively creates a societal transformation, and a positive one at that, is another story. In The Cosby Show's case, it was smart to use its universal stories to appeal to everyone. It was kind in its portrayal of black life, whether you agree with the end product or not.
Maybe you can just accept who I am and love me anyway, because I'm your son.
Theo, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. No wonder you get D's and everything.
A concept that before that was pretty one-dimensional on both the small and big screens. Lastly, simply putting it, it was important for the cultural landscape that it was helping to pave. So they may have gone about it in a way that didn't ruffle enough feathers in a specific way. At the end of the day, it worked. The Cosby Show successfully maneuvered a landscape that had never been maneuvered by people that looked like them before, helping to shape a new world, one that included a young black man residing in Chicago that was to become our nation's first black president.
My fellow citizens, I stand here today humbled by the task before us.